Hello and welcome to the first ever He Said, She Said podcast. I'm Doug Austin, editor of eDiscovery Today, and I'm the He Said.
And I'm Christy Burke. I'm president and founder of Burke & Company PR, and I'm the She Said.
Welcome to our podcast where we'll discuss interesting and educational trends within the eDiscovery and legal communities. Today's podcast is about diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, in eDiscovery and legal tech. And we have three industry thought leaders who are not only eDiscovery experts within our industry, but they're also leaders in three organizations that are committed to DEI initiatives. Our first panelist today is Candice Corby, president and CEO of Cobra Legal Solutions. Welcome, Candice.
Great to be here. Thanks so much, Doug.
Great to have you. Our next panelist is Deeanna Fleener, VP of Litigation Services at Integreon. Welcome, Deeanna.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
And our final panelist is Joy Murao, founder and CEO of Practice Aligned Resources. Welcome, Joy.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, we will have several interesting topics to discuss, and I will turn it over to you, Christy, to lead off the discussion.
Thanks, Doug, and welcome everybody. So the first question we have is open to all four of you. And Doug, I'm going to rope you in here to comment from your perspective as well. So the question is, what do you think is holding back diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is DEI progress in our industry? And how can we get past those obstacles? And I'm going to ask Deeanna to go first.
Excellent. Thanks, Christy. So one of the things that I think is holding back DEI, not just in our industry, but all over, is that there's no real clear definition of when you are diverse. So there's a lot of definitions, a lot of things that people do wrong that we know isn't diversity DEI initiatives. But when it comes to, on paper, what it looks like to be diverse, there's no real definition there. So, there's so many different areas of diversity that we need to focus on and think about, not just gender, race, sexual preferences, but also physical and neurological capabilities. So, there's just a lot of gray area there. I think also something that really sticks out is the inclusive piece to that. It's awkward to talk about, but there's so many times I hear white men say, I can't say anything, or I can't have an opinion because I'm a white man. And that completely goes against DEI. We need to be inclusive of everybody, but we need to remember to be inclusive of everybody. So I think that those are, until we can really come up with what that clear definition looks like, I think it's going to continue to be kind of a gray area for a lot of people.
Thanks, that's great. Joy, what about you answering that question?
All right, thank you. So when I think about the question itself, like DEI in our industry, I go to the actual word industry. Defining our industry, first of all, has been a challenge. Not everyone grew up to be in legal technology or a litigation support analyst. Like, what is that, right? So I think awareness that legal technology is an industry, it is a profession, first of all. So awareness of letting people understand that there is a great career here, that behind every great lawyer is a great support team. When you look at the medical field, you have doctors, nurses, right? Everyone understands the configuration of when you go into hospital, how it takes so many people to build that machine. But when you talk about a lawyer, they think it's a lawyer, right? But they don't realize that there's a whole industry behind that. The second part that I think holds us back is the word technology, that everyone gets a little bit intimidated by technology, and therefore they think that, well, I'm not an electrical engineer, I'm not a computer science major. So I think that holds back diversity from both women being, coming into a predominantly male profession or educational track, for example, computer science and EE. Not saying there aren't women in there, but if you look statistically, there are more, right? But I tend to look in regards to women being in our industry, I think the legal perspective of it, having women lawyers, female lawyers, having more women are probably, I think, statistically paralegals than others. So I think that understanding and having an awareness that our industry is an industry, getting past technology as an intimidation or as an intimidating factor to being in his career. And then culturally, I'm Filipino by background, and if you're not a doctor, nurse, accountant, or in the military, what else is there, right? So I think, again, going back to branding and understanding that our profession is in some cases advisory services. It's not just client service, that it is something that you can be working hard, but also thinking. So I think looking at our transferable skills. So I think diversity in our industry needs to, one, be branding and awareness that our industry is an industry. And then two, kind of leaning towards what are those transferable skills that need to come about and really be more inclusive and having more diverse, whether it's socioeconomic or if it's just by education, like not everyone has higher education, all those different things that also are included in diversity, not just cultural diversity.
Wonderful, thanks. That's great. Doug, what about you? Let's hear from you on this.
Well, obviously, I'm discussing the challenges from a different perspective because I haven't had to face exclusion because of my gender, race, or sexual orientation. And honestly, from my standpoint, I feel like there's two types of exclusion, not just in legal, but in society as a whole. And I would call them active exclusion and passive exclusion. To me, active exclusion are actions that are intentionally taken to exclude diverse candidates from hiring or promotion. And those actions aren't usually blatant. I mean, they may be things like, people don't say they're not choosing to hire or promote a candidate because they're a woman or they're a minority or what have you. I think they use terms like, well, they're not a cultural fit. Or they may not choose to promote a woman because she has a quote unquote abrasive personality when men behaving similarly aren't categorized that way. So that's what I would consider to be active exclusion. But I think the bigger issue is what we would call passive exclusion. That's where people in hiring and promotion positions aren't even considering diversity, equity, and inclusion in their decision making. Lack of diversity is like Fight Club. The first rule of lack of diversity is we don't talk about lack of diversity, it seems. I think people in leadership positions aren't asking the questions enough. They're not asking questions like, are we including diverse candidates in our evaluation process? Or are we making it difficult for diverse employees to advance within our companies? And so I think those are questions that companies need to ask. And I think that's why DEI initiatives are so important. They've got to really help make companies look within and ask those hard questions. And we need a lot more of that, not just in eDiscovery and legal, but in society overall. Thank
you. Candice, I didn't want to leave you out on this question. Would you like to add something?
Absolutely. So at Cobra, we are a very diverse organization. So Cobra Legal Solutions is a global entity with probably 500 plus diverse individuals. And I actually have a little bit of a joke going back and forth with my Chief Revenue Officer, Doug Kaminsky, that I hired him for diversity because he's a white male. We actually have 63% women worldwide, and we're 89% diverse. Well, thank you. That didn't happen because I had a diversity initiative. It's because we have an open mind and we bring our true selves to work. Every single person that comes to potentially work for Cobra, first off, they take a double-blind test. So we don't know what their diversity statistics might look like. We hire and recruit the best person for the job. And it just so happens that we then became one of the most diverse organizations in our industry. And I would say that that's the best way to get there, is to not have an initiative, but actually to be doing it, right? And so I'm really, really proud of that. I have an amazing team. The team is extremely collaborative. They work with each other to bring themselves to work. And so I think it goes to the whole point of making sure that you're hiring for the job and for what you want to achieve, not necessarily for your diversity. And then when someone is diverse, showcasing that. So it just so happens, and I'm kind of excited to say this, is Cobra Life Week is this week. And so what Cobra Life Week is it's just that. It's bringing your whole self to work. And so we do that with poetry, with art, with music, with photography, from all walks of life. And no matter where you're coming from, what religion, what, ethnic background, social orientation, sexual orientation, you name it, we bring it all together globally. And so that's happening this week. And so really, really, really exciting. But I think that's part of what I say is inclusion. Include everybody from where they're coming from.
Wish I could join you on that.
Absolutely. I can't wait. I told my team I have some pretty awesome photography of some moose in Jackson, Wyoming. So
Fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to go over to Deeanna now for the next question. So the question is, what would you say about the state of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the legal tech eDiscovery world today? And then after Deeanna comments, we'll go over to Candice on this. Deeanna?
Thanks, Christy. So diversity is no longer just an RFP question. It's no longer just a paper answer. It's something that is important to clients. It's important, not just the numbers within your company, but who actually is doing the work. Where is that diversity? Where does that exist within the company? Is it just at the top, or is it throughout the organization? And I really think that this kind of new emphasis on DEI, not just initiatives as Joy was saying, but really as part of the organic being of your company, I think is something that has been a change I've noticed in our industry, and it's a really great change. And I'll say I've been in this industry for about 18 years now, and I was in a meeting at a financial institution a couple months ago. Well, actually before COVID. It seems like a few months, but it's actually been like 2 years, right? But it was in a large financial institution, and we went in, and it was 8 women in that meeting and only 2 men. Wow. And the 2 men were on the service provider side. So it was just kind of visually for me, I kind of stood back for a second and was like, this is such a change to where I was 15 years ago, or 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago. It was an awesome kind of moment for me to experience. So I think for our industry in particular, it's always been rather male dominated, but I definitely think that it's becoming much more diverse, and I think it's becoming much more inclusive. It's no longer the old boys club. It's not cool anymore to be the old boys club. It's cool to be, just part of the club.
Yep.
Great change.
That's great. Candice, can you answer the question with your perspective, please?
Absolutely. So I kind of look at this as pulling back the onion. Let's peel the onion a little bit, right? So for years we kind of just glazed it over, right? And we said, oh, well, we're a woman-owned business or a minority business or whatever, right? And so we had some of those initiatives at Fortune 500 companies on RFPs, like Deeanna said, right? Well, in some respects, that was just sort of the glaze over it, because it wasn't really inclusivity. It was really just, oh, instead of the man who owns the company, you put it in his wife's name or whatever. And then it was categorized as a woman-owned business. Well, now we're peeling back that onion and saying, now who is doing the work? Who in your organization is actually diverse? And so when my pharmaceutical companies come to me and say, I want to see who's doing my work and I want them to look like me, that's peeling back the onion. And so that's the whole thing. And I feel like we have the opportunity and the ability now in our organization and in our industry to peel back that onion and go, okay, let's showcase the people who are doing this and give them the first seat rather than the third seat, right? Let's put them in front rather than in the back. Let's get to the front of the bus, not the back of the bus. Let's, give the seat to the person who hasn't had it before. And so that's kind of how I look at our industry, is instead of us just glossing over it, let's open it up. And I think we're seeing more and more of that.
All right. Sounds really good. I'm going to go over to you, Joy, now, and feel free to comment on the previous question. I have a question just for you. I'd like you to share some of the strategies of how you've been able to succeed as a diverse member of this community.
I would say, let's see, what have I done? Keeping myself educated. I'm always interested in new technology. I look for opportunities to show value. I really look at there's always a challenge and a problem. And I will sit at a table and a lot of people will start to put in, well, we don't have this, and they'll tell you for 15 minutes what they don't have or what they can't do. And I don't know, just my personality, I don't know if it's my name is Joy, but I'm always like, well, here's what we have, and here's what we can do.
You're well named.
I would say my mom must have been psychic. But I think for me, I always talk to people about opportunities to show value, that there is always that when we talk about diversity, I always think about diversity of background, experience, right? Problem solving. And when you really are, and that there's just, while the cases look the same, every case is very, very individual because of our clients, and everything has a different need, or a different law firm has a different culture or different technology they're deploying. So there are always these forks in the road, and you all kind of sit at a table and go, we can't do this, we can't do that. So I think it's always trying to find have the opportunity to show my value, even if it's just a positive spirit in the room, because I will tell you so many times it's just going downhill and you're like, who's hungry? Yeah, right. So again, and don't judge it, right? Really, because pretty soon through time, people want to turn to you. Where's Joy?
Yeah,
because they want that positive energy. They want what we can do. And also it's negotiating, saying, it's not perfect, but let's iterate and let's figure out how we're going to get there. So I think that served me well. And education is key. And I think people know that I've really tried to strive the last few years to try and create and seek out those opportunities for people to reinforce and try, and maybe they don't see the opportunity. So I do a lot of mentoring, and again, just trying to help people come to their own realization how they can best fit, because change is hard all the way around. And we've been experiencing changes at law firms, from a strategic change to, again, legal technology coming in and people not understanding, and they're thinking that we're displacing legal secretaries or displacing paralegals. But I think those are opportunities for those different categories. And so just trying to work with people and giving them education and making them feel valuable and valued.
I like what you said about the positivity, because I think that is such an important element of DEI participation, not focusing on the negative and inviting people to participate, inviting new ideas, instead of, again, reinforcing an exclusionary idea when the point is to include people, right?
Yep.
Exactly.
So I have a question for Candice. How does DEI inform how you do your job, how you hire, how you set goals? And I think you already mentioned some of these things, but what would you like to add?
So I'd add to that on a couple of areas. So for us, as far as setting goals, I want my clients to see themselves in Cobra. And I think that's a huge goal that we can, as a community, as an industry, and really as a global community, strive to do, and make sure that we're seeing ourselves in everything we do, and that our clients are seeing themselves in what the service delivery they're receiving. And I think that's a big goal. One of the things I'll share with you, and it's probably one of my proudest moments through this sort of DEI roadmap, if you will. I hired an individual in New York City. His name is Damian Allen, and he is from Jamaica, and fabulous guy. And we put together some information, and everyone's always asking us for our diversity stats and all of that. And so there was a LinkedIn post that went out, and Damian put a message on the LinkedIn post that it was the first time in his life, in his entire career, that he wasn't a minority at his company and his place of business as a Black male. And I was blown away by it. Probably like I said, one of my proudest moments. And I think if everybody can feel that included, then we've won. And so that's my goal.
Amazing. Well, I want to thank you all for your comments. I'm going to turn it over to the He Said Doug now to do the next part of the podcast interview. Doug.
Great. And one final question for each of you. Tell us a moment, about a moment or a situation where you realized you wanted to be part of the solution, not part of the problem regarding DEI. There's no need to name people or companies, just say what happened, how it was a wake-up call for you. And I'll start with you, Deeanna.
Thanks, Doug. So I think one of the kind of the deciding moments for me was back at the beginning of the Me Too movement. I had been speaking with someone who I considered a close friend. He happened to be a white guy. He was talking about going on a business trip and how he was going to be traveling with a female colleague and how he wasn't allowed to do that because he'd end up as a hashtag. And I was just so shocked and taken aback hearing that, especially from someone that like I said, I considered a friend, that I had to do something. You know, I kind of stopped him and I was like, you know, this is what the Me Too movement means to me. This is what the Me Too movement means to other women. And you making even just air quote jokes like that sets us back another years. You know, it's not appropriate. And I'm not sure if he learned anything from that, but what I learned was that I didn't want to just be one of the good old boys and just blend in with the guys. It was more than just being about me speaking up. It was by me speaking up, it brought the issue to the forefront and it would help other women and others, you know, that were affected. And it kind of opened my eyes a little bit to, you know, to realize that speaking up about these issues isn't necessarily an individual thing, but for the good of all of us.
Great story. Thank you, Deeanna. Joy, would you like to provide a story?
Yeah, for me, I think I was very fortunate to be at one really big law firm for over 13 years. And it was a great culture. And, you know, to be honest, you know, you're just working and you're growing with a company. And I didn't even notice outside, right? And so I reached my global manager level. So I was able to start to travel around the world and start to really meet with people and, you know, go out to dinner or go out to some happy hours. And hearing people's stories outside of our community is when I started to realize, and that's when I started to join, when I joined Women in eDiscovery, is when I started hearing other people's story. I'm like, what, you don't get promoted? What, you don't, or you mean you're not invited to that meeting? That should be you. You don't write or prepare your own budgets? Who does that for you? So, I mean, it was interesting how naive I was, and that I was just very fortunate to be in an organization that was very supportive and allowing me to do my job. And so just going around and hearing things, so it might've been like, gosh, it must've been 2007, 2008, when I was starting to, and then that's when I joined Women in E, and I wanted to be a part of that, of one, providing encouragement to women, setting an example, and also being very clear on how you can help yourself be hired, you know, looking at people's resumes and doing mock interviews with them, because I think as a woman, there's a lot that we just inherently, you know, maybe we ask instead of just, not say demand, but be a little bit more forthright in what we want. We would rather sit back and wait. And so kind of providing some feedback to women and giving them tools to help understand how to find their voice. So I'd say in 2007, 2008, for me, didn't realize the position that other women were in, and I wanted to do as much as I could to help share my story and share my life, Candice, with them, to set as an example and encouragement to other women. So I'd say feedback then.
Great, thanks, Joy. And we just did some of that right now, so thank you for that. So Candice, what about you?
So there's two stories that come to mind for me, sort of two areas and sort of pinnacles. One, for many of you who don't know a lot about Cobra, we have a huge contingency in southern India. And India, like Afghanistan, and maybe not to that extent, but is not as equitable, gender specific, and many other ways as well, as the United States and many other countries. And so one of the things that I've always tried to do is foster some heavy women's initiatives and inclusivity and equality with our India team. And one of the things that we do there to try and do that is give some financial freedom. So if you think about that, and you might not realize this, but in India, not everybody has a bank account. And so therefore, women don't necessarily have their own money readily available to them. Well, Cobra sets up bank accounts for every single employee, and we deposit their check into a bank account with their name on it, right? Now, I don't know what happens to it after that, but I at least know that they're getting it directly to themselves rather than to their in-laws or to their husbands or whatever. Well, that gives some degree of financial freedom. And so freedom of finances gives freedom of choice and then freedom of voice. And if you have those types of freedoms, you also have hope. And so trying to instill that level of hope is in my opinion, a massive and major area of inclusivity is hope. And that's a global hope. Now, again, I've shared with you guys that we do blind testing when we're hiring, double blind. So we don't know people's backgrounds readily when we're bringing them in for an interview until they walk in the door, right? So it just so happens that we end up having a whole bunch more diverse candidates, even that come through the door. But that being the case, we do a lot. And so we are a diverse organization, but I have to tell you, I had a really big aha and wake up moment last year. And so last year during the riots of last summer, I had an individual who is one of my senior managers, a Black male who works in one of our attorneys, said to, we were just having sort of water cooler chat, if you will. And he said that so-and-so said they didn't see color, and that really hurt my feelings. And I was taken aback by that comment. And I thought, gosh, for such an inclusive organization, one that touts its diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I feel like we do so many things right, and we still have those kind of comments where we're doing a lot, but we're not doing enough. And so that was my moment when I said, okay, we might be doing a lot of things, but I started at that moment what I called the Global Inclusion Committee, not a DEI, not a, women's initiatives, but a Global Inclusion Committee, the GIC. And I did my first global address to the company. Just so you know, Zoom is very challenging with number of people on it. Teams is very challenging. I had 197 people in our company show up for the first ever global inclusion Zoom call, and kept getting knocked off the call and people trying to get back in because there was that much need for that discussion. And so we've taken that further and further over the last year and a half, and it has two heads to it. There's a co-chair in India and one in the US, a male, a female, an Indian, and an American. One is an LGBTQ person, but a massively inclusive group. They put together the Cobra magazine. It's a virtual magazine internally to showcase everybody's diverse perspectives and where they're coming from. So I feel like now we've taken one step forward. Do I think we're done? No, but that was my aha moment. And one of the things that I hope that I can showcase to the rest of the world, to the rest of the industry, and maybe we can be a beacon of light to others to say, hey, here are some things you can do.
Great. Thanks, Candice. And thanks to all of you for sharing those stories. Christy, anything you have to add?
Well, I really benefited so much from this conversation. I want to share my aha moment, which came very early in my career with my first big job. And I worked so hard at this job. I, tried to impress and knock everyone's socks off. And I had my first review with my boss, And he said, you know, he gave me all kinds of feedback and everything. And then he said, but there's one thing, like you always feel like you have to be heard in every meeting. You might want to work on that. And I said, work on that. I said, if I'm at the meeting, I would like to be heard. And it really was a wake-up call for me that my voice is important and I need to be surrounded by people that also feel my voice is important. And what everyone has been talking about is creating that environment where people can be heard and that they're invited to speak. And so I'm so glad we were able to get this together. This is very important material to be putting out into the industry.
Great, thanks, Christy. And great discussion today, everybody. Really, really very informative and very interesting. And I really thank you for sharing all your perspectives. So I want to thank Candice and Deeanna and Joy for being our guests on He Said, She Said, and to Christy for being an excellent she said to my he said.
Thanks,
so,
everyone.
yeah, so look forward to seeing you all next time, and goodbye.